This is the ODM spreader topside gluer. How the machine works. This is your glue trough. There's two adjustments to control the thickness of the glue you're applying. One on either side.
Zoom in, Kev. Zoom in on one.
How that works is on the bottom we have a brass doctor blade. It's spring loaded on either side, so when you make your adjustments to the glue coating, you want to make sure you do it evenly on both sides. Very rarely are you going to want to switch that glue coating. Once you have it set, you probably will not be changing that setting. But it is spring loaded on either side. If you do make an adjustment, you just have to make sure that you do it evenly. And the way you do it evenly is just by visually looking at the glue roller, and you can tell your thickness of glue that way. This whole glue roller assembly fits neatly onto the machine. These two knobs, to remove this whole assembly, you just unloosen the two knobs and lift this assembly right out. The glue trough itself just fits right into the machine, and it's as easy as that. The machine utilizes a standard feed table, pushes right into the machine. One thing you want to make care with is before you put glue in the machine, you want to make sure that these copper fingers are tight. You do not want these fingers to be loose. And I'll go over why that is the case once I have glue in the machine. But you want to make sure that those are tight before you put glue in it. Typically what you want, I am putting a small amount of glue in the glue trough right now. You could fill this all the way, 3/4 of the way up. The unique feature about this machine is you're adding glue as you need it. With this much glue that I just put in here, this will be adequate for about 50 covers. Beginning of the day, you could certainly add glue all the way to the top, but let's say you're starting up the machine towards the end of the day, there's no need to fill it all the way up with glue. You could just fill it maybe 1/4 of the way and you're fine. The glue adjustment that I went over previously, you take an Allen wrench and just watch the glue coating on the glue roller.
All right, let me cut.
The glue adjustment is very easily. You put an Allen wrench into the adjusting knob. To make adjustments to the glue coating, you insert an Allen wrench. Clockwise cuts down the glue coating. Counterclockwise increases the glue coating. When you make adjustments, you want to make sure that you have an even glue coating throughout the face of the roller. As mentioned previously, there is two adjustments, so if you adjust one side, you certainly have to adjust the other side to match.
Okay, let me see if I can zoom in on that one for you. Okay, beautiful.
The key things you want to look for when operating the spreader is after a period of time, you're going to see a glue accumulation on the copper fingertips. This is a cold PVA adhesive meaning it's water-based. So if you aren't continuously running sheets through the machine, what's going to happen is the water content of the glue is going to evaporate, and it's going to be necessary to add water occasionally. All you simply do is have a handy Windex bottle with water and give a couple squirts throughout the day on an as-needed basis. The telltale sign is when you see glue accumulating in clumps on the fingers, that means the glue is getting very, very dry and you have to replenish water to it. There's no secret to how much to add. A couple squirts usually works fine. This is the slider case gauge. Very simple to use. We have two locking nuts that lock these arms into position, and this is simply a self-centering adjustment. With the gauge, there's also a parts kit, so if you want to change your joint spacing, you can easily do that. We have different length screws and different width spacers that you can create your own joint spacing. We have an adjustable side guide. We also have a light box that is unique when you're doing one of pre-printed laminated covers that has printing on the spine. When you have printing on the spine, you obviously want your center board strip to line up with the printing. So what you would do is just disengage the side guide, and you would keep these arms loose, and you would put your cover stock in and line up the printing by eye, and then you could spot your boards easily. One of the most important things to understand about this gauge is any adjustments on it have to be made square. In your kit, we have 2-step blocks. These are very critical to the accuracy of this gauge. These blocks are used on the back stops, and simply to check the gauge for squareness, you unloosen the 2 knobs and you set it to whatever desired turn-in that you require on your covers. The necessary turn-in is going to be a standard of approximately 3/4 of an inch, however that can vary. When you have this set, you make sure that it's in the same notches. You tighten up the knobs. Now you know your gauge is perfectly square, so you will be making square book covers. Parts kit has a varying number of arms, we call them, and they also have different spacers and different length screws, so you can create your own joint spacing. Typically for side sewn books, that spacing is either 5/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch, and people who are doing perfect bound, case bound books, the spacing is generally around 7/16 of an inch. But you have a lot of flexibility here in the parts kit that's provided with the gauge, so you can create your own joint spacing as needed. This is our Stomper air-operated turning-in machine. The machine is a very simplistic machine. It's pneumatic. Stepping on the foot pedal turns the fold bar over. The only adjustment you really need to know about on the Stomper is the pressure of the turn bar. That is a spring-loaded adjustment, and how you set that adjustment is you take the board you're using for your covers, depress a foot pedal, and these should be held snugly in place. You shouldn't be able to pull these out. If these are loose, you just unloosen the lock nuts and you adjust them accordingly. The Stomper has an adjustable front guard. you want to always have this guard adjusted so you cannot get your fingers underneath it. The stomper also has a window, so when you insert your cover to be turned in, you can visually see with your eyes that it is up against the turn bar. After a while you'll do it by feel, but visually you can see it up against the turn bar. The only other adjustments with the stomper is the speed of the turn bar. You can speed it up or slow it down. Typically you want to keep it at a constant. The only adjustments you really want to make is on the actual pressure on the turn bar itself. This turn bar will stay down as long as you keep your foot on the foot pedal. Certain materials like photographic paper, which is very rigid, you will find that when you go to use the stomper to fold the material over the board, you're going to want to hold the foot pedal down a little longer than you normally would. One important thing to understand about the stomper is you're never to run the machine with this guard removed. If you have to go inside to make any adjustments or clean any excess glue off the turn bar itself, there is a...
Okay, we're zooming in on the air shutoff valve.
That way, by shutting off the air, there's no possibility of you accidentally stepping on the foot pedal and pressing your finger underneath the turn bar. Always make sure this guard is adjusted so your fingers can't go underneath. The last machine on the line is our squeezer rotary press. Essentially, it is just a motor-driven set of rubber rollers. What it does is it just presses your finished cover. Really no adjustments on here except for the gap or spacing between the two rubber rollers. You can't see it right here, but in the rear of the machine, the guard flips open by removing two screws, and you can see that there is a gap between the rollers. The gap is necessary because when you run your covers through the machine, if you get any kind of glue squeeze out, the glue squeeze out will only transfer to the top roller. Therefore, it won't transfer to the bottom roller, putting glue on the good side of your cover. And that is the only real adjustment on the squeezer. The squeezer has a safety guard. If my fingers go in, it shuts the machine right off. But again, this is the only adjustment on the squeezer.
Zoom in. Okay.
This shows the squeezer with the rear guard open. No time should you have this guard open when the machine is plugged in. Anytime you want to open this guard, you want to unplug the machine as a safety. The only time you want to open this guard up is if you have to clean the rollers. Never use a razor blade to clean excess glue off the top roller. As long as you feed your covers through the same way, meaning good side of the cover facing down, you're going to occasionally get some glue buildup on the top roller. What you do is you have a rag with some warm water, and you simply just wipe the roller down as you turn the hand wheel, and it takes the glue right off the rollers. Do this periodically. Don't wait 6 months and then decide to clean the rollers. You want to maybe do this once a week because you will get a little glue buildup. Again, no razor blades on the rubber roller. Warm water in the rag takes the glue right off. First thing you want to do before you run a sheet through the spreader, you want to make sure that the fingers are snugly tightened down. The principle of how the machine works is when you feed the sheet into the machine, the leading edge of the sheet instantly tacks to the glue roller. We have 2 additional feed rollers to aid in helping that material come around the glue roller. The purpose of these 6 copper fingers is to prevent the material from wrapping around the glue roller. If you have any of these that are loose, what can happen is when the material comes around and hits that loose finger, it's going to crumble up and you're going to have a little bit of a mess. When that happens, 99% of the time you have to shut the machine down and clean everything up because you're going to get glue on the bottom feed rollers and everything. So just make it as a standard part of your routine before running the machine to make sure that these fingers are tightened. Usually when you clean up the machine at the end of the day, you would unloosen these fingers. So again, just make sure that they're tightened. And keep in mind that this is a topside gluer, so when you want to feed your material through, you're feeding it through good side facing down. And you just want to take your material, just run it through just like that. Biggest learning curve of case making is what I'm about to do right now. After you have both of your long sides folded in, you have to do what they call nicking the corners. Nicking the corners is simply just folding the material over at the sides. You can do it with your fingernails, but if you have multiple people using the machine, your corners might vary slightly. If you want perfect corners 100% of the time, you can use what they call a bone folder. Take the bone folder, you can see how nicely the material folds over.
Let me zoom in on that guy. In the event that you get dog ears hanging over, that means your cover nicking was not done in a proper fashion.
And lastly, we want to feed our cover through. Again, good side facing down. You don't want to run them intermittently, good side up and down. You want to do it consistently. So feed them through the same way each time. What you want to do when you feed your material through the gluer is you don't want to pull it. You want it to just naturally feed itself off of the glue roller. As you can see, I sort of cradled it. There's no need to pull it and get glue on your hands. Just simply put your hands underneath it and just help it onto the table. I'm going to show you what happens if you do not nick the corners. This is a turn-in where you can see there's an excessive amount of material which people refer to as dog ears. It doesn't necessarily mean the cover is ruined. You can repair this with a razor knife or a pair of scissors and carefully trim back this excess of material. And you can see the results when you properly nick the corners. A couple things that you'll have to do on your materials when you feed them in the spreader. If you're using a laminated cover stock or photographic paper, sometimes you'll find the material has a tendency to be curled up. What you want to do is curl it back the opposite way before you fold it in, and that'll just help it come through the gluer much easier. If you zoom in on my glue coating right now, you'll see I am putting down a very, very thin glue coating. One thing to understand about case making is if you run too thick of a glue coating, what's going to happen is when you push your material in the stomper, you might find this material popping open and not adhering. One common thing that people do is if this isn't sticking, what they do is they go back and increase the glue coating. That is not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to cut the glue down if it's not sticking. By adding glue, it's going to only make the problem worse. So if you ever have a problem where this material is opening up, A, it could be because the stomper pressure on the turn bar is not adjusted properly, or 2, you might be running too much glue. You can see my glue coating is so thin that this glue is almost dry already.
Kev, could you zoom in? Can I zoom in on Nick's corner so I can show him what we're going for? It's kind of hard to see. Okay, hold it steady, hold it steady. Okay, yeah, I can see that Nick there. Okay, that's good. Perfect. Okay, make the case. You can finish it.
One other thing I will point out, whenever you do your two long side or your two short side turn-ins, you can see this material is curling up. In many cases, if you are doing photographic paper or a laminate, what happens is by the time you do the two long sides and you nick your corners, this material might be folding downward like that. What happens if you insert it in, this material sometimes can drag on the table. And obviously it's not going to fold over nicely. You can see we have a specially designed front guard on the stomper. I did not cover this previously, but if this was a laminate, what you might want to do is just press it in the guard just to sort of start that fold. Okay, so you know when it comes in, the material is going to fold over the board nicely. You'll know when you run your materials, you can see how they curl down. If they curl down, you simply just take it and you can just start to fold and the machine will do the rest. That is the reason why this cover is bent over the way it is, just to help you preform a laminate or a photographic paper.
Oh, perfect. I can see it beautifully.
When you insert your cover into the stomper, as previously mentioned, there is a window here. If you press this in, it's going to hit a stop, okay? You can also look at it visually, so in this case you can see the material folds over nicely. On this turn bar, you'll notice the unique feature of the machine. When you press your material up against the turn bar, what happens is the turn bar presses outward. So you can be assured that you will get very tight cover wraps each time you cycle the machine. You'll notice on our turn bar, we have Teflon tape on it. The purpose of this Teflon tape is if you get any kind of glue squeeze out, it's not going to really transfer to your cover. After a period of time, you will have to remove this front white guard. You do that by turning off the lockout switch, taking the 5 cap screws out, and using a rag with warm water, and you could just wipe down and remove any excess glue. There is also a black rubber pad that you can see. You can just clean that up using a rag with warm water as well. Keep in mind, after you clean that rubber black pad, it will have a tendency to get very sticky. If you're running a laminated cover in, what you might find is it's really going to stick down to that rubber pad, and it's going to be a little difficult to get it out. You'll see we have some white baby powder on that rubber pad. It is a good idea to keep some of that on hand, so whenever you do clean up that rubber pad, just sprinkle a little bit of baby powder, and that'll help your cover slide in and out very easily. Another thing that I did not mention is the tabletop surface as well. What you want to do is try to keep it free of glue at all times. One thing that works very nicely is using furniture polish. It keeps the table very slick, and we found that the glue does not really adhere to the furniture polish, and it's very easy to clean up. So if you have some baby powder for the turn bar and some furniture polish, that'll certainly help you out tremendously. Here we're doing a laminated cover. One thing we didn't talk about is this line is built for 2 people. One person can average anywhere from 60 to 100 per hour. With a secondary person, you double your production. So you'd have one person feeding the material through the gluer and spotting the boards, and you'd have a secondary person doing the turning in and feeding it through the pinch rollers. One person can easily run the line. They just cover a bigger footprint. Here with the laminate, you can see the material starting to curl down. You can probably get away with pushing it in and shimmying it side to side. But again, this is why the guard is bent the way it is. You can just start it. Our material's cut a little off, but this is just for demonstration purposes. One thing with case making is it's very important how you prepare your corners on your material. They should all be cut so they match on both sides. What that does is that eliminates a material buildup at the corner. You can see here, this is about the amount of material you want at the corners. You don't want to have an excess of material because then your corner tucking becomes very critical. This is very nice. This is the amount of material you want at your corners because it makes tucking very easy so you don't have a buildup of material. And you can see this laminate wants to fold down a little bit, so again you just want to hit it on the guard just to start it. Now I purposely cut my material like this to show you. this is an excess amount of material. You can see we have to use a little more care in nicking the corner here because we have a lot of material. There's a lot of material to fold over. This isn't necessarily bad. You just have to keep in mind if you had cut your material incorrectly for whatever reason, and this is the amount of material you have, you can still make a high quality cover, but it's a little more difficult. Zoom in here and show it on the board. When you lay out the size of your book cover, a general rule of thumb, I talked previously about having an excess amount of material in your corners. Typically, you want to have about a board and a half thickness gap between the corner of your panel and the edge of your material. Here we're about 1.5, which is nice. This will be very easy to tuck the corners. If you had, let's say, 2 or 3 board thicknesses, again, it's not going to be a bad cover, but you have to pay a little more attention to your cover nicking. We didn't cover how to cut this material. Generally speaking, this is about 1.5 to 2 inches radius. You can use a paper cutter with a customized jig. You could use a hand cut trimmer, again with a jig, or you could purchase a foot cornering machine that has straight knives. But do not take cutting this for granted. This is a very important part of case making. You want your material to be equal on all 4 sides. If you're sloppy in cutting your cover material at the corners, it's going to show in your turn-ins. They aren't going to be consistent. You should fold your sheet over and make sure everything lines up nicely, which in this case it does. So you want to pay particularly close attention to that. On the spreader gluer, we've let the machine run now for about half an hour idle without running any sheets through it. And you can see we're starting to get the beads of glue that I described earlier. How you can correct the problem is, what I do is just simple squirts. What you don't want to do is feed a sheet through immediately because you'll have a lot of water on the roll and you'll have to let it build in for a little bit. Usually about 30 seconds works well. And you can see that that little bit of water has replenished the glue. Very, very important to be aware of those glue accumulating on the fingers, because what will happen when you feed your sheet through and you have big globs of glue on the fingers, your sheet comes through, you're going to have 6 specks of glue on your cover material, and then what's going to happen is that glue is going to transfer to the table, and it's just going to continue down the line, and you're going to have a lot of glue to clean up. So if you're aware and pay close attention to the glue buildup on the fingers, making cases will be very, very simple. Cleanup of the spreader is very simple. You obviously want to make sure the power is turned off. We have 2 unique handles on the machine to make it very easy for the operator to carry it to the wash-up sink. A key feature here, if you do this, you'll only do it once. You do not want to take this glue trough out until you're at your wash-up sink. As you saw earlier in the video, it is a hollow bottom. So if you pull this out, you're going to get glue that's going to drop out of the bottom. So you want to keep this in until you get to your wash-up sink. I unloosen my knobs, and this whole assembly pulls right out. And then I'm off to clean up in the wash-up sink. Hot water is a must. If you have a good deep sink with hot water, this will clean up in about 3 minutes.